Kinesiology 223, Chapter 10. Still talking about leadership. This is book presentation number 3. We talked a little bit about required, actual, and preferred leader behavior. We're going to delve into that a little bit more here. And then leadership in the pursuit of excellence as a topic here. Let's go ahead and move on in. So the required behavior versus the actual behavior was something we touched on in the previous presentation. But you have this expectation within a team, and you have norms within a team, and as a result, your leader will drive towards those norms. They'll drive the culture towards those norms, and they'll try to drive their own behavior, but the behavior of others towards those cultural norms. And I will tell you that those cultural norms, and I said it earlier in another presentation, those are set in place long before the first day of the season. You have an expectation of who you are, what you want to accomplish, and how we're going to do it. And you very much outline that and make that very clear and articulate that to your athletes and, quite frankly, to your recruits coming in. So you recruit the right athletes who hear that message. It resonates with them. You might say you want to win 75% of your games, and a person who is a church league player in basketball will say, well, I'm not going to play here ever because I just want to come and shoot some baskets, right? So, you have to deliver the message, and it has to be genuine, true, and authentic to what it is you're trying to accomplish. And your people will be expected, your athletes will be expected to conform to those norms based off of what you've set out. Norms, they're set by the coach. A new coach comes in, they kind of change the culture a little bit, and they'll put in new norms. But some of these are just socially implicit to the program, and they've been part of team culture and part of the culture of the actual program for some time. Now, I don't know why in the world the book did this, but in terms of required leader behavior, they talk about what are established norms, and they note, for example, a physical education teacher, they're expected to have behave certain ways in front of their students, fellow teachers, and parents. They talk a little bit about the behavior of a PE teacher, basically attending parties with their students. And I just don't get why they put this in here, but they put it in as an example. But let's go ahead and move on from that, shall we? Actual leader behavior, it's the leadership behavior that's exhibited by the coach or the athletic director. To say you're going to do one thing and do something completely different, that'd be a very disingenuous process and not very authentic to the process and authentic to yourself. If you tell people you're going to do X, Y, and Z, you better not do A, B, and C, right? So you have this actual leader behavior, and it's directly affected by the person's personality, their ability, and their experience. And you got to have a balanced combination of those. You have to have a personality to be able to interact with other people. You have to have a skill and the understanding to be able to handle the soft skills as well as the hard skills. And you have to have the experience of working in a department, whether it be as a coach or some type of peripheral role where you understand the nuances of the department. But you got to understand that it really comes down to the discrepancy, if you will, between these things that really put a challenge into the equation in terms of actual leader behavior. Again, a person might come in and they promise they're going to do X, Y, and Z, but once they get into the role, they're not very gregarious or friendly or outgoing. They're actually introverted. Their personality is not very good. They're going to have trouble with the coaching staff. Absolutely. And beyond that, they have to have a hard skills of ability as well as the experience to be able to manage the process. Now, you go ahead and look at preferred leader behavior, and the book elaborates a little bit further in terms of, the group members have preferences for their leader behavior. If you go to a school like Alabama, you have preferences for a leader. Your preference is that you want somebody who's a winner. And sometimes those preferences, though, can have biases, right? And you can look at it in terms of the age of the person, the bias of the person. And when you have a little bit of a biased mindset like that, you start to look at the person who's in front of you, who's taking over your program, and you become critical of them because of their age or gender or experience. As an athlete, you, in some regards, have to just take for granted that the person they're bringing in to coach your team is qualified and skilled. Sometimes it's not the case. But with preferred behavior, you have interactions between the group and the leader. And within those interactions, you can have very open and honest communication with your athletes and say, all right, we did this. I implemented this. What were your thoughts on this? And depending upon the level of your athletes, younger, older, low IQ, high or low academic IQ versus athletic IQ, etc., you can have very open, honest conversations regarding what they expected, what was preferred, and what was the actual, and maybe fine-tune your delivery a little bit. Now, granted, you're not going to change who you are completely because that's disingenuous in of itself. You would probably fine-tune a couple little things to help meet your athletes at halfway or better. And I will say this, when you talk about relationships in college athletics, the preferred behaviors are implicit in the relationship. You go to certain schools, you know what the expectation is. You play Division I athletics, shoot, you play athletics in college, you do any kind of athletics in college. You know that there's certain behaviors that are kind of baked into the process, and it changes your college lifestyle as an athlete. You know this going in. So it's kind of implicit to the process. And I think as a coach or a teacher or a manager, whatever it is you may be, you need to understand those expectations. You got to understand the expectations that you're putting in place and make sure they're realistic for a student athlete who might be 18 years old and it's the first time they're living from home. You have to really kind of evaluate the population in terms of, who you are and being able to deliver a consistent message as a leader. And I'd be willing to bet that if you talked with a group of athletes, one of the things they'd want is a genuine leader who's consistent in his messaging and fair. Those are probably your big three, right? And you have to really embrace that as a coach or manager. So leadership in the pursuit of excellence, it's all about, in some regards, the end game or the end result. But I would say this, when you look at excellence, excellence can be a process and excellence can be an end result. And as a coach, if you're delivering a message that we're pursuing excellence, but you allow for mediocrity, you're not being congruent. You have to have tight practices, not tight, emotionally, et cetera, but you have to be tight in what you're delivering, tight in how you deliver your content, make sure it aligns very clearly with the outcomes that you're trying to desire. And there's a thing called validity in education. We oftentimes talk about the construct validity, if you will, of a testing instrument. If I provide you a bunch of information, I tell you I'm going to test you on psychology, sports psychology, and then I provide you a test on how to dissect a frog, there is no validity. One is not testing the other. So as a coach, you have to have validity in your program, meaning you have to set the objective, set the goal, and then your messaging, your behavior, your actions, your interactions, those all have to align with that focus like a laser beam and stay on target. And you try to stay as close as possible in terms of your messaging and behavior to the goal itself. What ends up happening is because you're seeking excellence and you want to do great things, the process will become excellence oriented. So it's outcome oriented as well as process oriented. And the book lists a ton of them, listing on 230. I'm not going to bury you with those here, but here's a bunch of them over here to the right in terms of like, you look at winning, but not winning at any cost, individualized attention, personal recognition. These are all things that are very valid in being in alignment, with that message towards just overall excellence in the program, as well as excellence in terms of your outcome. But I would also say it becomes a virtuous cycle where it becomes a message of excellence in the people that you recruit and the people who actually make it into your program. So your culture that pursues excellence, kind of helps to transform the athlete through facilitating different attributes such as self-efficacy and their competitiveness. And the coach creates the environment, and I would say also the athletic director to a certain degree does as well. And you want to be able to, and I mentioned you have like the doer, manager, leaders. Now we're talking about leaders at this point. And when you have leaders who are pursuing excellence, they have to be able to craft and be able to communicate what is the compelling vision. What compels my athletes to show up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do speed agility work 3 times a week during the off season? What compels my athletes to be able to come in to preseason ready to go? We don't have to prep, they're ready. And my point to you is, you start to think back to one of our lectures where we were talking about extrinsic to intrinsic. How do you then have in place a culture where you're taking these extrinsic type of motivators and trying to internalize them and make them intrinsic with your athletes? And I've said it 1,000 times, I'm going to say it 1,000 more times. But it's the coach that creates the environment, and you have to present that vision, and you have to be able to not only present it, but then each day in practice, you have to reinforce that compelling vision to be able to continue to motivate and drive your athletes. It's all about changing culture. It's all about having good core values. It's all about recruiting the right athletes who embrace those values. And then you put in place a punishment and reward system that aligns with behaviors that supports behaviors that are aligned with your core values. That's really what it comes down to. So I'm definitely in agreement with this. It was, if I'm coaching an athlete, and I make it a point to ask, I always make it a point to ask regarding my athletics or my athletes. I always make it a point to ask my athletes how they're doing in their academics. Oof. And, excellence kind of permeates everything, right? And I oftentimes will teach courses that are second 8 weeks. And one of the first things I have, if I'm working with athletes in a speed agility class, it's great. Second 8 weeks, how are your classes? Are they going well? If they're not going well, what are you going to do? If, if I end up in front of you at this point, can you tell me where your classes are, who your instructors are? And more importantly, can your instructors tell me who you are, right? So it becomes a conversation of how you become fully vested in the process and realize that when you're working with student athletes, it's not student athlete, it's student athlete, and they work very much together, and one should be supportive of the other. And it's your goal. It's you as a coach. You have to craft that message and deliver that. Excellence is a lifestyle, and it's part of our program, and it's part of our vision for success, big picture. So there are times when a leader, takes on a leadership role and begins to implement their vision process and benchmarks for a goal, and it forces those in their influence to see potential differently. And I said this earlier in another presentation. You take somebody who's playing weak side linebacker and you put them in a strong side corner, they may not originally think that they're going to be successful, but then all of a sudden, because you see their skills and their abilities, you put them in another role, they start to blossom. And it's very much the same. So, you have to be able to sometimes intervene at a granular level like that, but other times on a much larger level, you may have a visionary position for what you're trying to do within the program, and it'll inspire other people to do well. Not only do well, but to succeed. Not only to be more successful, but to work at an elite level. And really what you're doing is you're talking about a transformational leadership component that helps others become more motivated to rise up to what your now expectation is and the expectation for your program. There's a couple things listed here, and I agree with these things to the right as well in terms of the interpersonal, intrapersonal, and also the environmental and how they all kind of act within and with each other. Now with transactional leadership, it focuses more on reinforcing and punishing followers relative to team tasks and monitoring follower performance. And transactional and transformational kind of run hand in hand. But the punishment is set by the leader. In some situations, you have to have it. So with that, signing off, on to the next one.